Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. One of the biggest moves we saw during the offseason in the college football landscape was Lincoly Riley in the USC Trojans going out and grabbing D'Anton Lynn to come over and take over the defense for this USC program heading into 2024. As usual, late Sunday night, did a little deep dive to this UCLA defensive film in the 2023 season and want to talk about some things that we should expect for this USC defense in 2024 after watching what UCLA did in that 2023 year. And for USC fans, and for me, really, what excites me the most is normally you see maybe a year or two it takes to turn around a defense. For USC fans, you just saw D'Anton Lynn in 12 months take a UCLA defense that was below average in the Pac-12 and really make it one of, if not the best defense you saw in the conference last year. You take a look at some of the numbers. D'Anton Lynn turned around this defense in one offseason. And if you're a USC fan, and we know what the problem was. I will kind of bang the table on it. It was not the personnel on that USC defense that was the problem. It was the coaching staff, right? It was poor discipline, poor scheme. And for D'Anton Lynn coming in, you're kind of excited to see a substantial increase in defensive play heading into that 2024 year. Want to get into what I noticed from the UCLA film in 2023. Talk about what to expect from this D'Anton Lynn defense. Before we get into it, just want to say thank you to you guys and a massive shout out, as always, to the USC fans. This is a program that you guys know I have a blast talking about, but more importantly, the amount of support the USC fans show the boys. That stuff means a lot. Cannot thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into this one. And I want to just talk about what we saw from this UCLA defense in 2023, just from a number standpoint. This was a defense that in 2022 was really nothing to write home about. And you talk about this UCLA defense in 2023 allowing only 19.3 points per game. That was top 15 in the country. 4.5 yards per play. That was number 8 in the country. 2.7 yards per carry given up. That was number 2 in the country. They forced 1.8 turnovers per game. Number 11 in the country by almost every single metric. This was one of the best defenses that we saw in all of college football in 2023. And if you're a USC fan, you're saying, why can't that be a year-run turnaround in USC as well? Now, I went in and kind of took a deep dive into the UCLA defense last year, watched some games back, and want to talk about a few things that I noticed that I think a lot of USC fans should be expecting year one under D'Anton Lynn. And the first thing I want to talk about is versatility. And we had a very similar conversation with Steve Belichick and what he brings to the Washington Huskies as their defensive coordinator. I think the kind of parallel is both D'Anton Lynn and Steve Belichick come from the NFL landscape where you have a lot of different personnel packages, a lot of different looks, and that versatility in the Big Ten is going to be massive. Going back to what we saw from UCLA in 2023, you saw a lot of different looks according to what kind of offenses they were going up against. When UCLA was going up against a team like Oregon State that wants to play with 2 tight ends, that wants to run the football, you saw 5-down linemen, you saw 8-man boxes, you saw UCLA really kind of fundamentally change what they were doing on defense to match what Oregon State was trying to do. But then you turn on the film from a team like USC, you saw UCLA rush 3, drop 8, light boxes, forcing Caleb Williams to kind of take what was there. And we know that was kind of something Caleb Williams struggled with. And so what I think the thing that stood out to me the most in terms of the versatility was this defense looked completely different in regarding what kind of teams they were playing. And you look at the Big Ten landscape, I think this is going to be a massive, massive asset for USC in the Big Ten. Because you take a look at the landscape of the Big Ten, you'll one week be in Eugene, Oregon, playing Dan Lanning and the Oregon Ducks that want to spread you out, play speed and space. And then the next week you might be on the road playing the Iowa Hawkeyes in Iowa City that are going to play a lot of 12 personnel, try to run the football, and to be able to adapt and change your defense based on what the opposing offense is good at and is going to try to do is going to be massive. And that was something you just didn't really see under Alex Grinch. Alex Grinch very rarely changing what this USC defense was going to look like and what they were going to do. And they just kind of hope for the best. One of the things that is so exciting about for D'Anton Lynn, is the versatility that he's going to bring to this USC defense heading into that 2024 year. The next thing I want to talk about is the disguise. And this is something that is massive at the college football level. And you look at NFL defensive coordinators that have come down to the college ranks, or NFL coaches that have come down and coached defense at the college football level. D'Anton Lynn, a phenomenal example, but my Michigan Wolverines as well, with Mike McDonald and Jesse Minter. And that's kind of a trend that you recognize kind of across the board for these NFL coaches at the college level, where you are giving a ton of different looks to opposing offenses. And you saw UCLA put 8 guys in the box. You weren't sure who was coming. And you take a look at a young quarterback with a young offensive line, when a defense is giving you so many different looks and you're not sure who's coming, who's dropping back in coverage. Not only does it mess with the pass protection, right? Offensive linemen don't know who's coming. They don't know who to pick up. But you also see a lot of quarterbacks really confused at what they're looking at in terms of the coverage that they're being given, right? These are inexperienced quarterbacks, inexperienced offensive linemen. And when you have the ability to disguise what your defense is doing, that is extremely effective at the college football level. You saw them do that extremely well against USC last year. That is the UCLA defense, right? Putting a ton of bodies around the line of scrimmage. In some plays, they'd only send 3, drop 8. But what would happen is offensive linemen think this linebacker is coming off the edge, and they wouldn't pick up the edge rusher that's actually coming. You saw a lot of free runners, a lot of free hits at Caleb Williams. Now, yes, that USC offensive line certainly struggled, but you saw UCLA really take advantage of a USC offensive line that was just a little bit confused. And you go back to the Michigan film as well. Michigan did a phenomenal job doing this against Alabama in the college football playoffs, right? Putting a bunch of bodies along the line of scrimmage, dropping back some guys, sending some others, and you saw the offensive line just be confused about who's coming, and then the opposing quarterback is not really sure what they're looking at. I think the disguise, the different looks that you consistently see from D'Anton Lynn is going to be really effective for this USC defense. And you saw him go to the transfer portal and bring in guys that are going to fit that scheme. I think of a guy like Kamari Ramsey, who can play that nickel role, who can play the free safety role, who can play the box safety role. A guy like Kamari Ramsey can do a lot of different things. And that's only going to help D'Anton Lynn kind of throw at different personnel packages and different looks at opposing offenses. That's something that I'm really excited about. But one of the things that I got from his interview that I wanted to highlight was D'Anton Lynn kind of said, hey, we are going to be, quote unquote, simple as possible, but make it look like a lot. And you saw at times Alex Grinch was going to try to get a little bit aggressive and disguise looks, but you could tell that USC defense wasn't really sure what they were doing. They were kind of confusing themselves. D'Anton Lynn with this idea of, hey, our defense is going to be simple, but we're going to present it like it's a lot and a lot of different looks for the opposing offenses. And that's really what you want, right? You want your defenders knowing their responsibility, it not being too complex, letting them play fast and use their instincts, but you want to make it look like to the opposing offense that it's a lot of different things that are getting thrown at you. The whole purpose of disguising a defense is you're not kind of confusing your own defense, but you're confusing what the offense is looking at. That simple as possible, but making it look like a lot, I thought was a really interesting note by D'Anton Lynn. And the last thing I want to talk about is controlled aggression. You saw USC try to get aggressive at times in the 2023 season, and it was just reckless, right? They were bringing heat, leaving edge rushers to cover tight ends or wide receivers, and it was kind of a disaster when they decided to bring pressure. When you watch UCLA bring pressure, it's aggressive, but it's controlled. They're not giving up big plays. They only allowed 6.5 yards per pass attempt last year. That was top 20 in the country. They blitzed a lot, but they didn't give up the big play. And that's something that I think is massive in the college football landscape. You take a look at some of the numbers. Cade Medrano and Darius Musaw almost combined pressured the quarterback and blitzed the quarterback 200 times. And you see D'Anton Lynn wants to get aggressive with his linebackers. He wants to fire them downfield. I mean, Caden Medrano and Darius Musaw, the two starting linebackers for UCLA, both average depth of tackle was below 2.5 yards. What does that tell me? And you certainly see it on the film as these linebackers are getting downhill. They're playing aggressive. They're playing at the point of attack. But what you rarely saw was opposing running backs get outside and kind of – you rarely saw the UCLA defense lose their leverage. And I think that was something massive to note as well. You saw UCLA be aggressive, but they didn't give up big plays. And that's kind of the goal of defense, right? If you can be aggressive, create negative plays, create turnovers, but also not give up the big play, that is how you have a successful defense. And that's exactly what you saw UCLA have, right? They were top 20 in sack rate. They were top 5 or top 8, in yards per play. And they were top 10 in turnovers. But they didn't. So they were creating a lot of negative plays, but not giving up the big play. And that's another thing that really jumped out to me about D'Anton Lynn and this defense. And you combine that with bringing in a guy like Matt Entz and Henderson and Doug Belk. I am really excited about what this defense is going to look like, not because they completely overhauled the defense from a personnel standpoint, but from what the coaching staff is going to bring. If you get a more disciplined, a more sound defense for USC, you're going to see them improve. And I'm not going to get up here and say it's going to be a top 10 defense in the country, but it's certainly not going to be outside the top 100 if D'Anton Lynn can bring what he did at UCLA to USC. This is one of the bigger storylines in college football in my mind, because Lincoln Riley is going to put out an offense that's going to put points up on the board. If USC can force turnovers, be solid on defense, not give up the big play, this is going to be a team that not a lot of teams are going to want to play in the 2024 year. This is something we'll continue to talk about as spring practice rolls on. Really excited to cover it. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. I know we were getting a little bit in the weeds there, but that's something I enjoy talking about. Again, can't thank you guys enough for rocking with the fellas. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.